Hello, good afternoon student. My name is Hiral Raval. Today's date 3rd October 2020. Subject Science. Standard 10, chapter number 9. Heredity and Evolution. In previous lecture we have studied the accumulations of variations during reproductions and then we have studied the heredity. हमने heredity की definition देखी है. Then we have discussed the rules for the inheritance of traits, Mendel's contributions. Then we have studied the tall and short plant. All tall and offsprings, tall and short plants के बारे में हमने पढ़ा, Mendel's के बारे में हमने देखा. Then how do these traits get expressed? जो हमने पीस के एग्जाम्पल से लिया था, है ना, प्रीवियस लेक्चर में ये हमने सारा जो है वो डिस्कस किया था. देन वी हैव स्टडीड द सेक्स डिटर्मिनेशंस. सेक्स डिटर्मिनेशंस के बारे में हमने देखा मेल एंड फीमेल के जो है वो जो क्रोमोसोम्स एक्स एंड वाई, बेबी गर्ल या बेबी बॉय, है ना. फीमेल जो होती है उसमें एक्स एक्स और मेल में एक्स वाई जो है वो क्रोमोसोम्स होते हैं. देन वी हैव स्टडीड द टॉपिक 9.3 इवोल्यूशन. इवोल्यूशंस के टॉपिक में हमने बीटल्स के बारे में देखा था, है ना. देर आर वेरियस टाइप ऑफ बीटल्स. कलर्स में उसके जो है कलर्स में वेरिएशन था, तो वेरिएशन होता रहता है, उसके बारे में हमने देखा था. देन एक साइंटिस्ट है चार्ल्स डार्विन के बारे में हमने देखा था. ओके, हम फिर से रिपीट कर लेते हैं. चार्ल्स डार्विन, Robert Darwin. Charles Darwin set out on a voyage when he was 22 years old. The 5-year voyage took him to South America and the island of its coast. The studies that he conducted during this voyage were to change forever the way we look at the variety of life on the earth. Interestingly, after he got back to England, he never left its shores again. He stayed at home and conducted various experiments that led him to formulate his hypothesis that evolution took place due to natural selection. He did not know the mechanisms whereby variations arose in the species. He would have been enlightened by Mendel's experiment, but these two gentlemen did not know of each other of their work. We often associate Darwin solely with the theory of evolution, but he was an accomplished naturalist, and one of the studies he conducted was to do with the role of earthworms in soil fertility. This is the reason why the ideas of heredity and genetics that we have discussed earlier are so essential for understanding evolutions. Even Charles Darwin, who came up with the idea of evolutions of species by natural selection in the 19th century, could not work out the mechanisms. It is ironic that he would have done so if he had seen the significations of the experiments his Australian contemporary George Mendel was doing. But then Mendel too did not notice Darwin works as relevant to his. ओके, मैंने बताया था वैसे कि मेंडल्स को पता नहीं था कि डार्विन जो है वो क्या वर्क कर रहा है. Origin of life on earth. Darwin's theory of evolution tells us how life evolved from simple to more complex forms, and Mendel's experiment give us the mechanisms for the inheritance of traits from one generation to the next. But neither tells us anything about how life began on earth in the first place. J.B.S. Sunderland, a British scientist who became a citizen of India later, suggested in 1929 that life must have developed from the simple inorganic molecules which were present on Earth soon after it was formed. He speculated that the condition on Earth at that time, which were far from the conditions we see today, could have given rise to more complex organic molecules that were necessary for life. The first primitive organisms would arise from further chemical synthesis. How did these organic molecules arise? An answer was suggested by the experiment conducted by Stanley L. Miller and Harold C. Urey in 1953. They assembled an atmosphere similar to the thought to exist on early Earth. These had molecules like ammonia, methane and hydrogen sulfide, but no oxygen. उसमें oxygen नहीं था. Over water. This was maintained at a temperature just below 100 degrees centigrade, and sparks were passed through the mixtures of gases to simulate lighting at the end of a week. 15% of the carbon from methane had been converted to simple compounds of carbon, including amino acid, which make up protein molecules. So, can life arise afresh on Earth even now? आज से भी अच्छी लाइफ हमें दिखती है. दिस इज़ द इनबिल्ट क्वेश्चन जो मैंने आपको बोले थे. देन टॉपिक 9.4 स्पेशिएशन. व्हाट इज स्पेशिएशंस? What we have seen so far is microevolutions. That means that the changes are small, even though they are significant. Also, they simply change the common characteristics of a particular species. But this does not properly explain how new species come into existence. That can be said to have happened only if this group of beetles we are thinking about splits into two populations that cannot reproduce with each other. When this happens, they can be called two independent species. So, can we extend the reasoning we have used above to explain such speciation? Consider what would happen if the bushes the beetles feed on are spread widely over a mountain range. The beetle population becomes very large as a result. But individual beetles feed mostly on a few nearby bushes throughout their lifetime. They do not travel far, so in this huge population of beetles, there will be a subpopulations in neighborhoods. Since male and female beetles have to meet for reproductions to happen, most reproductions will be within these subpopulations. Of course, an occasional advantageous beetle might go from one side to another, or a beetle is picked up a crow from one side and dropped into the other sides without being eaten. क्रॉ भी ऐसा करता है, बीटल को एक जगह से दूसरी जगह वो ले जाता है ना, उसको खाता नहीं है. इन आइदर केस द माइग्रेंट बीटल विल रिप्रोड्यूस विद द लोकल पॉपुलेशन. तो जो बीटल जो है वो माइग्रेट होके गया है, एक जगह से दूसरी जगह गया है, वहाँ उसकी पॉपुलेशंस जो बढ़ती जाती हैं. This will result in the genes of the migrant beetle entering a new populations. तो जो migrant beetle जो न्यू पॉपुलेशन था उसके जीन्स थे वो उसमें ऐड हो गए हैं ना. This kind of gene flow is bound happen between populations that are partly. तो ऐसे जो है वो उसकी populations बढ़ती गई है ना, बट नॉट कम्प्लीटली सेपरेटेड, पर एकदम अलग नहीं हुए है ना. पॉपुलेशन जो है वो अलग नहीं हुई, पॉपुलेशन बढ़ती जाती है. थोड़े बहुत फीचर्स है जो माइग्रेट जीन्स के उसमें आ जाते हैं बीटल में, If, however, between two such subpopulations a large river comes into existence, the two populations will be further isolated. The levels of gene flow between them will decrease even further. Over generation, genetic drift will accumulate different changes in each subpopulation. Also, natural selections may also operate differently in these different geographic locations. Thus, for example, in the territory of one subpopulation, crows are eliminated by eagles, but this does not happen for the other subpopulations where crow numbers are very high. As a result, the green variation will not be selected at the first sight, while it will be strongly selected at the second. Together, the processes of genetic drift and natural selection will result in these two isolated subpopulations of beetles becoming more and more different from each other. दोनों से अलग होती है, ज़्यादा उसमें जो है वो डिफरेंस आने लगा. बीटल्स की शेप में, उसके साइज़ में बहुत सारा डिफरेंस आने लगता है, कलर में, है ना. Eventually, members of these two groups will be incapable of reproducing with each other even if they happen to meet. Okay? वो दोनों में चेंज आता रहता है. There can be a number of ways by which this can happen. If the DNA changes are severe enough, such a change in the number of chromosomes. Eventually, the germ cells of the two groups cannot fuse with each other, or new variations emerges in which green females will not mate with red males but only with green males. है ना, रेड मेल्स होते हैं, ग्रीन मेल्स, रेड मेल्स, अलग अलग कलर्स के हमने बीटल्स देखे थे. दिस अलाउज वेरी स्ट्रॉन्ग नेचुरल सिलेक्शन ऑफ ग्रीननेस. नाउ इफ सच अ ग्रीन फीमेल बीटल देयर इज़ नो रिप्रोडक्शन बिटवीन देम, है ना. जो बिहेवियर, जो ग्रीन फीमेल बीटल्स हुआ उसका तो कोई रिप्रोडक्शन ही नहीं हुआ, है ना. नाउ इफ सच अ ग्रीन फीमेल बीटल मीट्स अ रेड मेल फ्रॉम अ अदर ग्रुप, हर बिहेवियर विल एंश्योर दैट देयर इज़ नो रिप्रोडक्शंस बिटवीन देम. इफेक्टिवली न्यू स्पेसीज ऑफ बीटल्स आर बीइंग जनरेटेड. नए जो है वो बीटल्स जनरेटेड हो गए. ओके, देन अगेन इनबिल्ट क्वेश्चंस आर देयर. फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन, व्हाट फैक्टर्स कुड लीड to the rise of new species. Then second one is, will geographical isolations be a major factor in the speciation of self-pollinations plant species, pollinating plant species? Why or why not? Okay. Then third question, will geographical isolations be a major factor in the speciation of an organism that reproduces asexually? Why or why not? Okay. Then topic 9.5, evolutions and classification. Based on these principles, we can work out the evolutionary relationships of the species we see around us. It is a sort of going backwards in time. We can do this by identifying hierarchies of characteristics between species. Okay, characteristics में hierarchy means के difference रहता है. In order To understand this process, let us think back to our discussions on the classification of organism in क्लास 9। क्लास 9 में बहुत सारे क्लासिफिकेशन के बारे में हमने देखा है। Similarities among organisms will allow us to group them and then study the groups. For this, which characteristics decide more fundamental differences among organisms, and which one decide less basic differences? What is meant by characteristics anyway? Characteristics are detail of अपीरियंस और बिहेवियर। कैरेक्टरिस्टिक का मतलब क्या हुआ? बिहेवियर या तो अपीरियंस। इन अदर वर्ड्स, अ पर्टिकुलर फॉर्म और अ पर्टिकुलर फंक्शन दैट वी हैव 4 limbs is thus a characteristic. The plants can do photosynthesis is also a characteristics, है ना। प्लांट्स जो है उसमें भी कैरेक्टरिस्टिक है, क्योंकि वो फोटोसिंथेसिस की जो इफ़ेक्ट है वो प्लांट्स में होती है। ओके, then some basic characteristics will be shared by most organisms. The cells is the basic unit of life in all organisms. Cells जो है वो basic unit है। ओके, the characteristics in the next level of classification would be shared by most but not all organisms. A basic characteristics of cell design that differs among different organisms is whether the cell has a nucleus. बैक्टीरियल सेल्स डू नॉट, बैक्टीरियल सेल में ऐसा नहीं होता। वाई द सेल्स ऑफ मोस्ट अदर ऑर्गेनिजम्स डू। अमॉन्ग ऑर्गेनिजम्स विथ न्यूक्लिएटेड सेल विच वंस आर यूनिसेलुलर। थोड़े बहुत जो सेल है वो यूनिसेलुलर होते हैं, बाकी सारे मल्टी सेलुलर, है ना। हमने सेल के बारे में पढ़ा था। देयर आर 2 types ऑफ सेल, यूनिसेलुलर ऑर्गेनिजम्स एंड मल्टी सेलुलर ऑर्गेनिजम्स। यूनिसेलुलर में हमने बात की थी अमीबा, पैरामीशियम, यीस्ट, मोल्ड, यूक्लिना, ये सारे। और मल्टी सेलुलर्स में ह्यूमन बींग्स आ गए, एलिफेंट, व्हेल, है ना, वो सारे जिसमें एक से ज़्यादा सेल हो वो सारे मल्टी सेलुलर ऑर्गेनिजम्स हुए। ओके, दैट प्रॉपर्टी मार्क्स अ वेरी बेसिक डिफरेंस इन बॉडी डिज़ाइन बिकॉज ऑफ स्पेशिएशंस ऑफ सेल टाइप्स एंड टिश्यूज़। Among multicellular organisms, whether they can undertake photosynthesis or not will provide the next level of classifications. Okay, among the multicellular organism that cannot do photosynthesis, whether the skeleton is inside the body or around the body will mark another fundamental design difference. उसमें डिज़ाइन में चेंज आ जाता है। We can see that even in these few questions that we have asked, a hierarchy is developing that allows us to make a classifications of groups. The more characteristics two species will have in common, the more closely they are related. And the more closely they are related, the more recently they will have had a common ancestor. An example will have a brother and a sister are closely related, है ना। भाई बहन एक दूसरे के साथ closely जो है वो related होते हैं। They have common ancestors in the first generations before them, namely their parents. A girl and her first cousin are also related, but less than the girl and her brother. This is because भाई बहन एक दूसरे जितना मैचअप होते हैं उतना कज़िन भाई बहन मैचअप नहीं होते हैं, है ना। क्योंकि फर्स्ट जनरेशन में वो मैचअप हो जाते हैं। ओके, ये जो टॉपिक है ना हम नेक्स्ट वीडियो में डिस्कस करेंगे। अभी यहाँ तक रखते हैं स्टूडेंट। थैंक यू।